Hello, today is Thursday, June 4th. This is the third in what will be 4 videos in a short series I'm doing about my top 3 scare tactics or characteristics in horror films. The first video was just an introduction. Yesterday I spoke to the idea of tension, and today I'm going to talk about physical horror or the jump scare. I think the idea of tension leads very naturally into the jump scare because oftentimes that tension is built up and then it's released in that jump scare. What I guess some people call a cheap scare, and maybe it's just because they're angry that the filmmaker scared them or angry at themselves that they allowed themselves to be scared. Anyway, whether or not it's cheap, it's still, I think, pretty common amongst horror films that there will be at least one jump scare. Some are more shocking than others, and I think it can be a feeling of shock, fear, or even disgust. Similar to what I spoke about yesterday in tension and seeing something you don't want to see. I can think of a few films in recent memory that use this jump scare very effectively, and I won't talk about the most recent ones like Obsession or Backrooms, but going back to some of those Horror Weekly podcasts I listened to last week, there was one episode about, asking what was the scariest film since Hereditary. I personally don't think Hereditary was very scary. I know it's a very controversial opinion to have, but nonetheless, I understand the idea of the assignment. Horror Weekly polls the community, and the top 3 were, from third to first, Talk to Me, Bring Her Back, and When Evil Lurks. I watched When Evil Lurks after listening to the podcast, and it's been on my list for a long time. Finally watched it, and I can totally see it as being at the top of the scary films of the 2020s, or since 2018 when Hereditary came out. Some of those jump scares that happened in those films were, first, Talk to Me, and absolutely every single one of these films had at least one moment where I jumped out of my seat, covered my mouth, and said, "Oh my God." And so, Talk to Me, premise of the film, there's this ceramic hand. When you hold on to it and say, "Talk to me," you're inviting a spirit to possess you. At one point in the film, a very young character invites a spirit to possess him and then proceeds to harm himself very detrimentally. I was horrified when that happened, not just for him, but also for the character that allowed him to participate in this ritual, which is just, I couldn't imagine going on after subjecting someone to this horror. Bring Her Back, same filmmakers as Talk to Me, also had a few jump scares. The premise of that film is that one of the characters is trapped a demon, and that demon has the power to move the soul of someone who has died into the body of someone who is still living. So there is a point where a child who is possessed by the demon bites on a knife, and not the easy flat way. And similarly, horrified, don't want to look at it, but it's happening. So shocking when it happens, and you have to keep watching it. When Evil Lurks, I think that also had several jump scares and making you watch things that happen slowly that you know you don't want to see. But the shocking, horrifying jump scare that had me jumping out of my seat was when the dog lunges at the little girl and bites her face. I have volunteered at animal shelters. I've broken up dog fights in my personal life, and it's heartbreaking and horrifying, and just that whole sequence was just so scary. Scary to me, and scary in general, shocking, horrifying. And again, just another call out to something that's maybe not as scary, but just disgusting. The recent Send Help had a moment where Rachel McAdams' character is hunting a boar, and when she stabs it, there's just way, way more gore than there needs to be. And that's just, I think, a Sam Raimi trademark. So he does similar things, obviously, in Evil Dead, and then Drag Me to Hell, where it's so over the top, it's almost funny, but at the same time, you're squirming in your seat and kind of screaming at the screen. So that's what my idea is for physical horror. And just touching back on that idea of Hereditary, not one of my favorites for several reasons. The plot itself, I watched it several times, listened to some theory videos before I kind of really understood the depth of what was going on. And that's just me. I sometimes have a hard time grasping the implied story elements, whereas if we're bogged down in details, at least I know what's going on, right? So that was a complaint a lot of people had about Longlegs, was just too many details made it too confusing. And again, Hereditary also included some attempts at physical horror, but again, I didn't find those very scary either. So those are just my reasons for not caring for that film. A little bit off topic, but that's pretty much all I have to say about physical horror for today. I'll be back tomorrow with my final video discussing the unknown, or what lurks in the dark, and, probably continue having these little chats about things I like and dislike in horror, just for fun, because I love it so much. There are other things that, like I've said before, I love all kinds of media, not just horror. This is just, I don't know, it's my favorite. I can't really imagine it not being my favorite at this point. But anyway, thanks again for listening. I hope you have a great evening. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.